Hello Math 130 students, we are going to pick up on page 1, section 9.1. We'll be discussing the distance, the midpoint, and circles. So for the distance formula, what you have two different points on the graph, and you want to know the distance between them. Versus if you have the midpoint formula, you have two different points on the graph, and you want to know the middle between those 2 points. So midpoint you can think as the middle. Okay, so for example number 1, it specifically is asking us to find the distance. So now you have your x1, this would be your x1, y1, and you also have your x2 and your y2. So your equation, remember, comes from the distance formula, so that your distance is equal to, and you have the square root. And notice how it is subtraction inside the parentheses. So I'm going to have subtraction, right? So I have my x2 and my x1, my y2 and my y1 that I'm plugging in. So for my x2, I see that that's a 4. For my x1, I see it's a -2. My y2 is a -1. And my y1 is a +3. So let's think about this. So I'm going to have inside my parentheses 4 minus -2, which turns into a positive. So this is now 6 squared plus, and you're also going to have a -1 minus 3, and that becomes a -4, but you're going to square it, so it's going to become positive anyways. So you're going to have 6 squared, which is 36, plus your -4 squared, which is a 16. So 36 plus 16 is equal to a 52. And if you really want to simplify it, this can be a 2 square root 13 as your final answer. Remember, we can always break down 52. You have a 4 times a 13, and that 4 is 2 times 2. So now you would have a 2 squared times 13 for your 52. Now for number 2, it says to find the midpoint formula. So if I'm trying to find the midpoint formula, now I'm looking at this equation. So I'm like, okay, well, I know that I have an x1 and a y1, and I also have an x2 and a y2. So my midpoint is an ordered pair. So I have my x1 plus my x2 and my y1 plus my y2. So it's the sum of adding these together, your x's and your y's, and dividing by 2. So you're just like, okay. So this is going to represent my x, and this is going to represent my y. So in the x, I'm going to just add my x's together. So I have a -4 plus, and the other x value is 8. Now I'm going to look at my y's. My y1 is a +6. And I'm adding my other y, which is a +1. So really you have a -4 plus 8 divided by 2, which gives you a 2. And then you have a 7 halves. And that becomes your final answer. So this is your x value, and that's your y value. So your midpoint is just going to be that point right in the middle between those two, between -4, 6 and 8, 1. Now, if you're looking for circles, our equation of a circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. So it's really important that you notice that this h and this k represent the center of the circle, okay? And of course, this is what a circle looks like, and the r is the radius, and the radius, what that does is it only goes from the midpoint of the circle all the way to the end, okay? Now, for example number 1, it says find the center and the radius of the circle, then graph the circle. Well, we already know that the center is described as this ordered pair HK, and it comes from this formula where we have our h and our k. So here I have my h and my k. So h is equal to 3 and k is equal to a -4. So notice how my signs are opposite. So when I write my center, it's h and k. So that is what my center is going to be, 3, -4. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that center on my graph. So 3, -4, that is my center. Now let's look at the radius. So now it specifically tells us to look at the radius. So the radius is here. So it looks like my radius is my r squared, which is a 36. That describes the radius. But remember here in the formula that we have, it's an r squared. So if I really just want to get r by itself, then I would square root both sides. And since we're talking about a radius, it must be measurement, so it must be positive. So r is equal to a +6. So my radius is equal to 6. That means from the center, go up 6, down 6, left 6, and right 6, all from the center. So what does that look like? Well, we know that this is our center. So I'm going to go 6 in every direction. So this is up 6. This is to the right 6. This is to the left 6. Now I'm going to go down 6. Okay. So now that I've gone up, down, left, and right, then my circle is going to connect those 4 dots together. That is going to be my circle. Okay. All right. So let's try this again for example number 2. So for example number 2, I have my h and I have my k. So my h is a -4 and my k value, well, remember that my general equation really has an x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to my radius squared. So my k value, if I don't have anything, if this is just a y squared, well, that's the same as saying y minus 0 squared, right? That doesn't change anything. So here the k value is equal to 0. So I'm going to have my center as -4, 0. So -4 is 0 for my h and my k is here. So that represents my center. Now let's look at the radius. So I know that when I'm looking at the radius in the equation, it's that radius squared, and here that radius squared is equal to 1. So if I were to square root both sides, I get that my radius is equal to the square root of 1. So the radius is just equal to 1. So now I have my center and I have my radius. Since the radius is 1, that means I'm going to go up, down, left, and right all by 1. So here's 1, up, down, left, and right. So that is what my graph looks like, okay, with center -4, 0, and radius of 1. Now, for the next example, it says to write the standard form of the equation of a circle given its center and radius. So remember that general equation is given to you as x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to my radius squared. So you already know that your center comes from h and k, and you have your radius, okay, which is represented by just r. So here it says that the radius is equal to 6, so r is equal to 6. And it specifically says what your center is equal to. So your center is 2, -9. And remember, your center is just your h and your k value. So this is really h, and this is really k. So when I write out my equation, so remember I have the x minus h squared plus the y minus k squared is equal to my radius squared. So what I'm going to plug in now is going to be my h and my k value, since I already know what that is. I know that my h value here is 2, and I know that my k value is a -9. I also know that my radius squared, well, just my radius alone is 6. So I'm going to have x minus 2 squared plus y plus 9 squared is equal to a 36. And so that ends up becoming my final answer. I have my h, my k, and my radius. Now it says write the standard form of the equation of a circle given its center and the point of the circle. So again, it wants that standard form. So hopefully you guys are getting really familiar with this formula. The x minus h squared plus the y minus k squared is equal to your radius squared. And don't forget that your center, you have your h and your k. So here it says that we have the center. So that would represent your h and your k. So I know that I have x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to my radius squared. And it gave me my h and my k value. I know that h is equal to a -7 and that k is equal to a +1. So when I rewrite this, I know exactly what I'm plugging in. So the h value that I'm plugging in is a -7, and the k value that I'm plugging in is a +1. So I really have x plus 7 squared plus my y minus 1 squared is equal to my radius squared. So I plugged in center. So now that I've used the center, the other thing that it talks about is this point. So this is just an x and a y value. So I have x is equal to -7 and y is equal to 9. So now I'm going to put those values into my equation. So that x and y value, so the x value is a -7 and that y value is a +9. So now I have -7 plus 7, so that's 0 squared. 9 minus 1, so that's 8 squared, is equal to my radius squared. So I'm going to have 8 squared is equal to my radius squared. So that's 64 is equal to my r squared. So now I have my, my h and my k and my radius squared. So I have x minus my h value squared plus y minus my k value squared is equal to my radius squared. And I just found the radius. So now, since I have my h and my k, I can plug it all in, right? So I have my x plus 7 squared plus your y, and it's a -1 squared, and that radius squared is a 64. And notice how I already had this h and this k, and that was here in this equation. Okay. And that's the end of section 9.1. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to email me. Thank you.